A platform for CME, who you can leading third sector organisation looking at reducing stigma in mental health. And we're delighted to provide a platform for them today to deliver a workshop. I think it fits absolutely perfectly with our mission of improving service responses to personality disorder. Obviously, one of the areas where I think stigma is very, very acutely felt, and we'll hear more about that, I think, through the workshop. I'll maybe just mention a wee bit around about some of the language that we use within the programme, and we have called ourselves the Personality Improvement Programme. We've taken the lead from the Scottish Personality Disorder Network, so a mixed group of people with lived experience and clinicians. And we're aware that the term personality disorder and some of the language around about that can be very contentious. We took the decision that if the SPDN felt that using the term personality disorder within the title was a good idea, then we did too. When we're aware that sometimes the diagnosis is contentious, sometimes people can feel as if it's it is a prejudicial diagnosis. Sometimes people feel as if they are undermined by the diagnosis. We take the position that it's a diagnostic term, but we are concerned with the people at the heart of that, rather than so much the diagnosis. But we take a person-centered view, absolutely informed by valuing everyone's participation. So I'll talk a wee bit about some of the housekeeping stuff for people who are maybe not particularly familiar with Teams. So I think that's probably the next slide, please, Andrew. Well, that's me. I'm Gordon Hay. I'm the delivery lead for the programme and MS Teams settings. So across the top bar, there's a range of different functions. Most important within there would be the chat function. So if people have any questions or any observations to make through the presentation in the workshop, please write in there. There will be speakers, there'll be breakout sessions, and there will be an opportunity for some Q&A towards the end, but I'll leave that to Patty to explain in more detail. So enough waffling on from me. I'm going to pass over to Patty just now.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Can everyone hear me okay? Yes, perfect. Yes. Okay, thank you. Hi everyone. It's lovely to see so many people here. It means that there are so many people interested in understanding a bit more about mental health stigma and discrimination, and particularly the stigma surrounding mental illness. I think today's session hopefully will be helpful to all of you. There will be some information that will be quite, in a way, basic for some people, but for others might be a first. So please take what you can from this session, and whatever is said, I would advise to take it a bit as data and information to help you carry on your duties and deliver your services if that's what you do, or leave do something within your life with it. But before I start, I think it might be helpful to introduce myself. So I'm Patty Lozano Casal from CME. CME is the national program to end mental health stigma and discrimination. And my role within CME is to manage the program within settings. And by settings, we mean any spaces where people with lived experience the highest levels of stigma and discrimination as per the research and evidence. And those are workplaces, health and social care, education, and spaces for young people, but also in a way communities. Communities can also be seen as settings. So today, obviously, there will be a big emphasis on healthcare and mental health services. And so, yeah, I'm really keen to hear from participants as well about experiences and, reflections. So I'm going to also introduce my colleague, one of our senior volunteers, Catherine Watson. Catherine has lived experience and she will be sharing her own reflections after I give my presentation. And before I start, hi, I can see her there. And before I start actually with the presentation itself, I think it's worth giving a trigger warning. I'm conscious that there are people here with lived experience and some of the findings that I'm going to share can be quite hard hitting. It's fair to say that there's been a lot of work, good work, and there's still a lot of good work happening right now across the country. But from the data that we've received, it's clear that it's not a good picture for everyone. So I guess I'm just putting that out there. Please take a step back if you need to. Nicola or someone from the iHub maybe can add my email address to the chat. And if anyone wants to have a chat after today's session, I'm happy to pick that up by email and then a call or whatever is helpful. So before there's going to be, as Gordon mentioned, there will be time for discussions. So we'll come to that, and also a comfort break so people can refill their cups of tea or coffee. Next slide, please. Excellent. So before I begin to talk about this study, I think it might be helpful to start with some definitions. Stigma is the negative attitudes or beliefs based on a preconception, misunderstanding, or fear of mental health. Discrimination, on the other hand, happens when a person performs an action, whether intentional or unintentional, that creates barriers and inequality for people with lived experience of mental health problems. When we speak about stigma, it might be helpful to break it down a bit. According to the evidence and research, there are 4 types of stigma. Sometimes they wrap in 3, but the 4 are public stigma, which are the negative attitudes and beliefs held by the general public towards people with mental health problems. Self-stigma, which is the judgment people put on themselves, that is internalized stigma, which has often coming from hearing and seeing external stigma and discrimination. So perhaps public stigma, hearing what others think about certain conditions and what people might or might not do or be as a result of their understanding or perception of that condition. Stigma by association, when someone connected to people with mental health problems experience stigma themselves or discrimination by association. So that might be having a family member or a friend and supporting them and through a service and maybe just feeling stigmatized as a result as well. And structural stigma. Structural stigma happens when the rules, that's the closest to discrimination, I guess. And that happens when the rules, policies, and practices of social institutions restrict the rights of and opportunities for people with mental health problems. And when we talk about services, we're mostly referring to structural stigma. But I think it's important to highlight that actually services are delivered by people. And so people might have their own biases, they might have their own conceptions, and therefore it's worth noting that we're not only dealing with one type of stigma, which makes it even more complicated when it comes to taking action. And these slide links to a video, but I'm not going to be able to share the video today. But the video,
but yeah.
Sorry? Oh, I think someone might not be muted. Okay, so there will be a link that we will send together with my slides across with the video. Next slide, please. Okay. So Scotland evidences a social gradient for mental health, where living in the areas of highest deprivation increases the risk of experiencing a mental health problem. The evidence also suggests a gradient of public mental health stigma, with higher levels of stigma attached to complex and enduring mental illness, such as psychosis and harmful substance use, than to more common diagnoses such as depression or anxiety. We might be familiar. 1 in 4 people are estimated to be affected or experience. But the data, specific data on the prevalence of complex, severe, and enduring mental health issues is actually harder to find. And additionally, in Scotland, there hasn't been any large national surveys looking at the experiences of mental health stigma from the perspectives of those with lived experience of severe and complex mental illness. So although CME doesn't have at the moment the data on stigma associated with specific conditions, I think it's fair to say that there's a perception that people living with personality disorder experience higher levels of stigma than other conditions, or people living with other conditions. And a huge factor in here is the portrayal of certain conditions, personality disorder, in big kind of mass media portrayals, for example, through films like Fatal Attraction. I think there's also portrayals and that very discriminatory within newspapers, for example, when there are mass shootings, or so it's worth noting that. A huge driver for this work, however, has been, or to actually fill that gap, that's what has driven CME to look at this in more depth. And also because we, a couple of years ago, we published our strategy with fairness in mind. And for us, moving forward, we want to see a higher emphasis on tackling the stigma associated with mental illness. Next slide, please. Here. So I'm going to refer to the Scottish Mental Illness Stigma Survey as SMIS, just for simplicity. If I do mention the study, that's what it means. SMIS is the acronym. So I'm not going to share much about the methodology. What I'm going to do, because it's quite a complex study, but there's a full report. There's an executive summary, which I can share after today, and also a fuller report. And they provide a lot of information if people are curious about it. But I would like to share a few prompts, I guess, that hopefully will give you enough in terms of understanding how the study was set up. So the study, sorry, my voice is going. We use mixed methods, meaning a survey, small groups, and interviews. There were 416 participants. Sorry, I'm going to drink some water. And there were, oh my goodness. Okay, apologies. There were 416 participants, all adults living in Scotland with severe, complex, and enduring mental illnesses. And they had experienced mental health stigma and discrimination in the last 12 months when the study was carried out, right in the middle of COVID, between November 2021 and March 2022. So that means that we were right in the middle of COVID, the restrictions were in. So it meant that we had limitations in terms of engagement, but even so, we managed to get 416 participants who were very generous with the time that they provided through the survey. I think it took about 61 minutes per individual on average to complete the survey. So that was a lot of time that they dedicated to this, and that is great. I think it's fair to say that it's not representative of everyone living with mental illness in Scotland, but the data paints a clear picture of prevailing stigma and its impacts. Next slide, please. So here what we have is a breakdown of the mental illnesses that participants experienced within the last 12 months of completing the survey. And you'll see that the highest proportion reported a very severe impact was amongst those living with a personality disorder of around 30%. So we're talking about over 120 people or 150 people. Next slide. The first questions looked at the perception people with mental illness had about themselves and other opinions of them. What we see in this is the years of stigma and discrimination have left people feeling ashamed and assuming that the public and people in positions of power think the worst of them, including that they are dangerous and to blame for their conditions. So I would like to draw your attention to some of those statistics. 69% of the respondents think people in positions of power think that people with mental illness are dangerous. 78% think the public think that people with mental illness are dangerous, and 87% think that people with mental illness are to blame for their problems. I think the public think that, not themselves. The hammer praise. Yeah, so quite striking statistics that highlights serious self-stigma. Next slide, please. So I would like to read a few quotes. I embedded a few quotes from participants just to bring that lived experience element and bring the data to life. So this one says, I really feel like I'm a burden and I don't want to be. I don't want my daughter to remember me as, oh gosh, I had to go up and look after my mom today. Or instead of spending time with the kids, I had to go look after my mother. So that's why I sort of try and keep myself in my wee box and do what I can for myself. I do get up in the morning and stick the smile on. I know I do that. Another participant said, I'm negative about everything because of experience like this. I'm pure negative about trying new things, trying to access things. I'm scared of everything. When I go outside is when I had panic attacks. That's down to prior experiences trying to get help out there in a big, wide world. So they are quite striking, and there are loads of quotes through the report. I would encourage to read it, but bear in mind that they could be quite hard-hitting. Next slide, please. So we ask also respondents to tell us about what would be the things that they would find helpful to minimize some of those barriers. And they suggested embedding mental health education across all parts of our lives, including the school curriculum, improved student or workplace education, and also within public campaigns to encourage more open dialogue at home. They said that education should include how mental illness may present or be experienced to encourage people to seek help and support each other, to make sure that people understood more of the condition and there were less judgments being made. And in society, to reduce social inequality and address exclusion in employment, education, and relationships. Next slide. This slide shows the top 6 of the life domains. So we looked at 14 life domains ranging from what you see here, relationships, social media, healthcare, mental health, care services, mass media, employment, there was welfare, recreational spaces, housing, and others. And these slides shows the top 6 for frequency of experiences of stigma and discrimination, and also for impact of those experiences. And you can see that while stigma and discrimination is experienced frequently in some areas like mass media, it's nowhere near as high for impact. And areas like employment, which aren't as frequent, have much more impact. So what this means really is that people might experience a couple of instances where they feel stigmatized in the workplace, but that has a huge impact for them, and it might last. It might stick with them for a long time. Next slide, please. So Participants were asked questions about the type of stigma and discrimination they faced in each of the 3 areas of highest impact that they selected. And they were asked to say more about their experience of stigma and discrimination. So we understood the nature of it, what stigma and discrimination they anticipated experiencing, whether they expected to be stigmatized further, and where they had withdrawn from things due to stigma and discrimination. And as I'm going to share the findings for each of the top 3 or 4 domains, you're going to see a thread. You're going to see how experiences of stigma and discrimination lead to anticipating further experiences and end up in people withdrawing from taking part in opportunities or having relationships with family and friends and partners, which is very sad, in my opinion. Next slide, please. So what we have here is relationships with friends and family. And just to give you an example of that thread, we have 49% of people have been rejected or estranged from family. 67% as a result expect that people will not want to start a family or have children with them. And as a result of that anticipation, 45% stop themselves from starting a family, having children. That's almost 1 in 2 of people experiencing mental illnesses such as personality disorder or bipolar disorder. 72% reported having been treated unfairly when making or keeping friends. 82% as a result expect that people will not want to be friends with them. And consequently, 90% have withdrawn from relationships with friends. Something to think about. Next slide, please. So looking at some quotes, participants said, "I feel my conditions are a significant barrier to me being open and honest with partners or in pursuing potential partners, as I believe there is significant stigma attached to bipolar disorder." Another participant shared, "In the past, family members have said things like, 'I was having a good day until you phoned.' In another situation, when I spoke to family and they said, 'Why can't you not just be normal?' I think they try to help, but don't understand what they are saying is so hurtful." Next slide, please. So in terms of looking at what they felt things could be done to change this, education again was highlighted as a key element to embed. Education across society can help with understanding, consideration, and compassion to improve relationships. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're going now into the life domains, and the first one is employment. I'm aware that today is more about, healthcare and mental health services, but actually there are people with mental illness living and working within services. So it's worth looking at the element of employment. Here you see that nearly 3/4, about 71% of participants have experienced stigma and discrimination around employment. 24% of respondents with personality disorder selected employment. So we're talking about a high number here. People with mental illness find themselves out of work as a direct result of stigma and discrimination. And in fact, 57% have been unfairly denied employment opportunities. Of those who experience stigma, 85% have stopped themselves from applying for jobs, while nearly half have left work due to stigma and discrimination. It's fair to say that employers tend to talk about talent, and my question would be, for reflection, how much talent are we wasting by not supporting people with mental illness to actually access and stay in employment? For example, through reasonable adjustments whenever they're needed. Next slide. So a couple of quotes here. Due to my bipolar disorder diagnosis, I failed a workplace medical for a teaching role. Despite never having an issue related to my mental health throughout my teaching career, They subsequently quoted the Glasgow Bing lorry tragedy as their rationale, implying that my condition made me dangerous. I was certain that they felt I was unfit for work, so withdrew. I was without pay for 4 months as a result of this experience. I'm not going to read every quote, but just so that you get a sense of actually the depth in those experiences and the impact described by people. Next slide, please. So in terms, again, what can be done to help things? The study findings suggested that we should aim to remove the barriers which stop people gaining and maintaining employment. Reasonable adjustments, as I said before, such as, hybrid working, part-time flexible working, even changing duties for people over time, more regular breaks, mental health leave, all of that can help. And better workplace cultures to address bullying, judgment, and stigmatizing attitudes are important to the participants. Things like having networks of people valuing lived experience within the workplace and creating environments where people can have conversations and engage in campaigns like Time to Talk Day, for example, that is coming up in February. That's a plug-in to go and have a look at the CME website if you're interested in linking in with the campaign. All of those things are helpful, and surely there are things that can be done without much resource. Next slide. So now is when we get into mental health care services. And there's a lot of information here and within these sections of the report. So I would encourage everyone to have a look and a good read. It's worth noting here that the sample that selected the mental health care live area in their top 3 had a slightly higher proportion of respondents with personality disorders, 38% compared to 30% of the overall respondent population. The majority of people with mental illness say they experience discrimination in the very place they go to get help, and that is about 74%. People say they have been unfairly denied help, experienced unfair treatment from healthcare professionals and administrative staff, and have been excluded from having a say in decisions about their own healthcare. Concern about interactions with mental health care clinicians were commonly shared as well, with examples including poor communication, judgmental attitudes, stereotypical assumptions, or uncompassionate, patronizing, invalidating, or abusive responses from staff. Power imbalances within relationships with mental health care practitioners were also highlighted by a few respondents who spoke of a lack of autonomy and control, collaboration, or respect for their rights. The impact is people not reaching out for help when they need it. I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of findings. 80% of respondents have stopped themselves from getting help for their mental illness, and with 58% stopping themselves from calling 999 for an ambulance or going to hospital for emergency. So those are 2 really striking findings for me. Next slide. So I'm going to read the first of these quotes. Stigma that prevails around personality disorders is horrible. I have had mental health professionals tell me, I can kill myself if I want to. I can hurt myself and they won't help me or stop me because that's just how people with personality disorders are. It's so sad. I think that sums up quite well, or describes quite well the impact that these types of language can have on people. Next slide, please. So again, looking back to solutions, those with mental illness believe the issues stem from a lack of staff and funding. So they're not necessarily blaming individuals. I think there's an acknowledgement that people want to help, but maybe the system is too pressured. And so they said that for them, this leads to untimely responses and long waiting lists, unavailability of appropriate assessment and treatment in their local area, being discharged too soon, a reduction in support due to the pandemic, age-related service cutoffs, financial barriers to accessing private treatment and inflexibility of appointment arrangements. Issues around interaction with mental health clinicians included poor communication, judgmental attitudes, stereotypical assumptions around compassionate, patronizing, validating, or abusive responses from staff, which I mentioned before as well. Important to say here that there are positives in this in all areas, as I mentioned before. With supportive relationships, being treated with kindness, compassion, or understanding, and helpful services and improvements, all helping people in this area. I think today's session is an example of where people are really making an effort and they are trying to help improve things and to create spaces where people with lived experience can really voice their suggestions and their concerns. Next slide, please. So looking at healthcare services, as with other life areas, some respondents referenced degrading, dehumanizing, or stereotyped identities when considering healthcare workers' perceptions of them. They spoke of being seen as dangerous, attention-seeking, antagonistic, hysterical, lazy, illogical, or incapable because of their lived experience. Participants also described their physical concerns not being taken seriously and of being denied treatment, such as pain or UTI medication, IVF procedures, of appropriate care following self-harm. A few highlighted the life-threatening consequences of this, either through misdiagnosis or the suicidal feelings their physical health issues engendered in them. So looking at the specifics here, we have 85% have experienced unfair treatment when trying to get help for physical health problems. 32% anticipated being pressured into receiving physical healthcare treatment they did not think was necessary. And 85% have stopped themselves for asking for help for physical health problems. Next slide, please. I think these quotes are helpful illustrations of what that looks like in practice for people. After I disclosed my mental illnesses, I was told I wasn't sick enough to be admitted to the gastro ward. I was so upset by these comments and genuinely felt it was due to being discriminated against, as the doctor was fine with me until I told them about my personality disorder. I was later admitted to the gastro ward despite being told this, and had to undergo a procedure of which I was told I would be sedated for. I was denied a sedative at the last minute for unknown reasons. I cried throughout the full procedure. And for me here, I mean, there's a lot in that quote, but for unknown reasons, gives a red flag to me in terms of the conversation and the decision-making power that actually individuals may have at times. Next slide, please. So again, what can we do to change this? Considering the person as a whole, and making better links between physical and mental health services, that's the parity of STEAM. Taking physical health concerns seriously and ensuring quality and equity of access to physical health treatment for those living with mental illness. There needs to be improved public and third sector services, including mental and physical health care and the funding in place for it. And addressing those who act in a discriminatory way can be done through more effective complaints procedures, greater accountability, and a zero tolerance approach to staff who discriminate. Next slide, please. So summarizing then, I know it's a lot to take, but I would like to share the four themes that came through from this study. And I would really invite you all to give thought to what are the things that you can do within your role, within your life, to help change the experiences and improve the experiences of people living with mental illness in accessing and experiencing services, but also reducing the stigma and discrimination that they experience throughout the various domains. So the themes are societal values and understanding, identity and representation, and socioeconomic inclusion, as well as services and support. And I would like to draw your attention particularly to services and support. Removing barriers and making services accessible. people with lived experience can really tell us what this looks like for them, what's going to help. They are the experts, and we should involve them more in co-design of services, as well as design of referral pathways and assessment forms, for example. Timely mental health support, greater variety in therapy and approaches, and staff training and services. Next slide, please. That's it. Thank you very much for listening. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. I know the chat has been really active. Any questions, anyone? I don't know if there are any hands up because I can't see my chat function.
I think there was one question, Patty, from Lucy McGonigal, who asked, "Hello, can I ask how the participants in the study were selected, please?"
Yeah, so they were self-selected. So there was an information sheet that had to they had to kind of read and decide whether they wanted to take part. It was a self-selected approach, and what we did, because it was COVID, we went through partners to reach out to as many people as possible. We also offered support for people that needed support filling in the survey. So we tried to do meetings, phone conversations or phone calls, just to make sure that people had that extra support should they need them. But it was completely self-selected. And we weren't, I should have said also that we weren't able, because of the circumstances, to get ethics from the NHS, and therefore we know that we missed a big part of the population who were in secure accommodation and in hospitals as well, mental health services. There's a hand up, but I don't know who's got the hand up. Sorry, I don't know if you. Oh, Julia, is that? Do you have a question?
Yes, please. I just wanted to ask. My aunt experiences personality disorder, and especially when we were younger, my parents found it very difficult to manage her behaviors in a way that didn't put the children at risk, and they often had to say no to her because not only did she put us at risk, but she also put herself at risk. So there were things, for example, she wanted to take us in the car while she was under the influence of alcohol. And as you've mentioned, it was really, really difficult in a kind of loving way to say to her that at this particular point in time, this wasn't an option, but on any other day when she feels better, you know, we children would have loved to have taken her in the car. But the result of kind of arguments and quotations around that was, or became, that she wouldn't take us at all. So how do you deal with that, please?
Yeah, and thank you, Julia. Thank you for sharing. And I can't obviously comment on individual cases, but I guess what you're highlighting is the need for that conversation to make sure that there's understanding. And at times, I think it can be hard for people supporting others with mental health problems, because we don't feel what they feel, and we don't see how they see things. So as we're being open, understanding, and not taking things personal, I know it's easier said than done. I also, you know, my mother also had lived experience, and it could be really tough at times. But I think that's what you can do, because at the end of the day, as part of the relationship, and you know, it's their choice whether they take, you know, that action or not. So I think for me, the key thing is for people to have more open and honest conversations and be more understanding. I don't know if that helps, Julia.
Thank you. Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I introduce Catherine? No. Okay, so I would like to welcome my colleague Catherine Watson. Catherine will be sharing some reflections from a lived experience perspective and hopefully bringing even more the data to life. So I'll hand over to Catherine now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just a pre-warning that what I'm about to say, like, it's supposed to be roughly kept to 10 minutes. I think when I timed it, it was 12, but I was talking quite fast. So if I go too fast at any point, please someone just say in the chat, can you slow down? I'm happy to do so. So I'll start by introducing myself, following on from what Patty said there. My name is Catherine. I am a 31-year-old mental health nurse, writer, and psychology master's student. I'm here to talk to you today whilst donning the hats of two different people. The person who's lived on the receiving end of stigma and the professional who's tried to mitigate the damages. So we'll begin with the professional. I'm a newly qualified mental health nurse who chose to complete the honours programme to fully engage with health research, particularly relating to topics such as interpersonal trauma and its high prevalence with those living with personality disorders, and the importance of the brain-body approach in all avenues of healthcare. During this time, I won the Student Nursing Times Award for Student Mental Health Nurse of the Year for demonstrating leadership, creativity, and compassion. This may seem like an opportunity to blow my own trumpet here, but I am saying this to demonstrate the depths of my passion for mental health care and breaking down stigma and discrimination surrounding those who experience mental ill health. I speak of my profession and accolades as a way of communicating understanding of the other side of healthcare. I appreciate the long nights, the information overload, the incomprehensible level of responsibility, the current chaotic political landscape, the work-life balance, the paper-thin funding, the growing waiting lists and waning resources, the continuous battle with compassion fatigue and burnout, and the seductive nature of broad generalizations to categorize complex situations. So why do I talk about my professional passion? How is it relevant to stigma and discrimination to those with personality disorders, and why should you care? Because my passion, whilst grounded in a sincere faith in kindness, was not a natural occurrence, but a forged fury. Molten rage, exasperation, and misery from years of being mistreated, spoken down to, disregarded, and gaslit. This rage was forged into dedication and compassion to ensure that others would not have to experience the same thing. And major reason for a lot of these negative experiences that I had, the label, not even an official diagnosis of emotionally unstable personality disorder, and the undeniable stigma and discrimination connected to it. I understand the majority of you attending today are professionals, so I will give you the opportunity to wear the personal hat, as opposed to your current professional one. You'll look great in it, the style is perfect, and it really brings out your eyes. In this hat, I'd like you to imagine the personal side, how experiencing stigma and discrimination can feel, of being told, no matter what you do, that you're unstable, manipulative, sensitive, attention-seeking, aggressive, dramatic, dangerous. Imagine the feeling that these words turn knives from people you trust, could pierce your very soul as you battle with an already cavernous emptiness seasoned with guilt and shame of dealing with complex thoughts, feelings, and situations. Imagine a guilt for taking up space, a shame of feeling like you're wasting everybody's time, of endless waiting lists, and there's someone worse off who could use this space, of clinician caseloads overwhelming them and knowing you're just adding to it. Imagine the all-encompassing shame of not being able to cope, of not understanding why this is happening, of what do you mean my personality is disordered, of feeling like you're less of a person because you can't even control your own brain, the emptiness of late nights when you feel like such a burden that everyone would be better off without you, and the terror when it becomes all you can think, all you can feel. Then imagine the anger, the frustration, the outrage of being born with a brain that just won't cooperate, or living with the consequences of somebody else's actions towards you, and either way feeling terrified that the wrong person will find out because you will suddenly change in their eyes to someone lesser, less safe, less stable, less desirable, less dependable, just less. It's not a nice thing to imagine, is it? I can assure you it's worse to feel. These two hats are why I'm here today, as I'm a fine connoisseur of hats, you see, of understanding people's experiences so that we can learn to do better, to be better. I hope you like the hats I'm presenting you with today, because I'm knee deep in this metaphor and I frankly cannot turn back. I'll go into some more specific experiences that can contextualize these feelings and why it's so important that we identify how prevalent stigma discrimination is towards personality disorders, both personally and professionally. And thank you to whoever sent the laughing emoji at my awful joke. Professionally, I've witnessed some truly incredible practitioners from all fields, because mental health is not just for mental health professionals. You begin to learn who's in it for the right reasons, who to model your practice off, and then, unfortunately, those who have lost their passion, who've become compassion fatigued, or lacking of understanding far breaches the realms of ignorance to dangerous. One such example came from an area in which an individual was experiencing an episode of psychosis. I, being rather unmistakable due to my proclivity for bright hair, had a few incidences on the receiving end of this individual's violent manifestations, one which resulted in a physical attack. When discussing said incident with a senior staff member, I was met with one of the most shocking quotes I had the displeasure of hearing. "Oh, they've got what we call a raging PD. PD stands for personality disorder. It's a nice way of saying they're a..." The last word there I'll leave to your imagination, although I can allude to it by suggesting it is somewhat like Jeremy Hunt. This was not the first nor the last time I heard derogatory language and attitude towards those with personality disorders as a professional in a professional setting. Another such instance came from a senior who specialised in working with those with personality disorders, throwing themselves into their office chair and loudly proclaiming, "I hate PDs. They're all me, me, me." Personally, this raised the question of just who these people should be focused on in a therapeutic setting, if not themselves. Now, I am completely aware that those with personality disorders tend to have complex needs as opposed to be complex. They are complex individuals, usually with complex histories. It can be difficult at times dealing with anything that's complex, but it certainly doesn't make it easier when we categorize all complexities under generalized and derogatory terms. I've also had the pleasure of working with individuals who provided incredible care. They communicated with people not just about their symptoms, of care plans, or of treatment pathways, but about who they are as people, their fundamental values, and guided them through their options when they didn't know where to turn. Witnessing this sort of practice in action demonstrated just how far kindness and open mind and collaboration can go, and just how essential they are to positive, proactive, and progressive care. It is this approach to care that I can trace many incidences of positive development towards my own path to recovery. Not singular incidents, but a collection of parts that build on positive therapeutic relationships and progression and healing, because it is possible through small acts and sincere consideration to help people in a tangible way. Personally, some of the experiences I've had have stemmed from the title of personality disorder, except most alarmingly, it was only discovered many years after the fact that emotionally unstable personality disorder had been coded as a diagnosis without assessment into my notes years before any mention of it to myself directly. This was discovered accidentally after being diagnosed at 30 with ADHD and CPTSD through assessment a year prior. This apparent EUPD diagnosis was based off of the inappropriate practice of a junior consultant with no communication made with a senior colleague, who made this conclusion after meeting me twice in 2 months. There was no indication of why this decision had been reached, just that this was his impression and that I was not keen on any further input for mental health services. Of course, what was missing from this narrative was the intimidation on his and my key workers' part, reminding me of their heavy caseloads, the psychological restraint of the small office, and the repetition of "you're too sensitive." I was 19, traumatized, confused, and so incredibly alone in this tiny office, flanked by these two adults, two professionals who wouldn't yield until I agreed with them simply to escape. For the pleasure, a diagnosis haphazardly thrown into my records with no sincere justification that snowballed for the next 12 years, justifying limited assistance and treatment, disregarded physical health concerns, and overall a lack of compassion. It leaves me in a perpetual state of fear of being judged based off the associated stigma of EUPD, of being found out by my chosen profession, and by being seen as incapable, fear of not having my concerns, either mentally or physically, taken as seriously due to the problematic brush that PDs have been painted with. Even after receiving a formal diagnosis explaining my experiences, it does not mean I'm impenetrable to the knives thrown at those with personality disorders, because someone wrote this diagnosis in my medical records and countless someone's thought it looked about right. Because why? I have dyed hair, tattoos, certain clothes, because they had the preconceived idea of what someone with a PD looked like, acted like. Because once that box has been alluded to, it seems to be a natural inclination to try and fit everything about that person into that box. And that was the box I was given, forced in for years. They fit me into that box, changing who I was and what I'd been through to fit into their stigmatized views of personality disorders. So pop on that hat again and consider how you'd feel when you see that box you've been told you fit in represented in the media as unstable, dangerous, manipulative. When you hear other professionals let off steam at the expense of countless collectives of people who are just trying to navigate this chaos called life. Because I can tell you how it makes me feel. It makes me feel small, like a curse, a monster, a burden, like any good I have done or will do is obsolete in the face of how people view this box, completely ignoring my fabulous collection of hats. Because there's that anger. There's also that anger, that powerful fury that can so easily be used against people that fall under the PD diagnosis. An understandable, valid anger that I have for that little version of me, that child, that teenager, that scared and confused adult, the one, despite what stereotypes and exasperated professionals would have you believe, did everything right. She was patient, quiet, kind. She went along with the treatment plans, the CBT, DBT, SSRIs, and EUPD pathways. She kept her head down and her mouth shut, even when intimidated, called too sensitive, too complicated, too extreme, and even when at 14 she was accused of trying to get antidepressants just to share with her friends. She remained placid, polite, and considerate. Despite what years of complex trauma had screamed at her to believe, she trusted the professionals, the adults in her life, as you should. We work with the most vulnerable in society. We are held to our profession's values, morals, codes of conduct. But then there's also the anger for those that I've had the pleasure of knowing both personally and professionally, who have either had their trauma, ADHD, autism, bipolar, depression, anxiety, eating disorder, PTSD or CPTSD misconstructed and manipulated into a PD diagnosis, or those who do have a legitimate personality disorder, those who have had their experiences, emotions, thoughts removed from the parameters of understandability within the human experience and thrusted into pathologized symptomology. These people, these very real, very human people, in many incidences, many kind and loving and considerate people, they deserve better. They do not deserve to have their complex experiences, their enormous hearts and their fundamental selves pushed dismissively into a box made out of overgeneralizations, streamlined formulations, dismissive protocols, and painful stigma. And yet, too many of us who have been in that PD box, for whatever reason, have a horror story to tell from the hands of professionals. Now, I can understand old Ethel down the street, but the people who've gone through the training, the ones who had the experience, knowledge, and supposed dedication to helping people, there's an art and science to mental health care, and honestly, healthcare as a whole, and many times the complexity of the science can create a divide from the importance of the art. Like art, those who seek or benefit from the services are complex, both simple and complicated, erratic and calm, hopeful and sometimes hopeless. They are, at the very core, human beings who long for understanding, guidance, and connection. Whilst it is fully up to the individual to take them steps themselves and to put in the work in earnest, we cannot push back on the momentum and growth with generalized views of what a diagnostic manual stipulates they're meant to be. And this itself can happen when we're not careful with our words, our beliefs, and our culture. Now, I'm not expecting anyone to remember the ins and outs of this formulated word vomit I've presented you all with today. I don't expect any of you to remember my experiences or hold me in your mind by any means. All I request is that from all of this, you remember one key element. We are all a sum of our genetics and our environment that is, within itself, incredibly complex and far beyond a title, a diagnosis, or a set of criteria. Remember, above all else, that the people you work with and you speak about are entire complex beings who have come to you during what may be the lowest possible points in their lives. This will be a daily occurrence for you, but exceptional circumstances for them. So be kind, be considerate, be focused on the person. When you feel as though patients may start lumping together like you're pouring from an empty cup, listen to that. Acknowledge that and do what you need to do to help yourself so that you can continue to help connect with and empower people who have been entrusted under your care. So you get to keep that hat, the one that I made. I made it especially for each and every one of you, and may it sit on your thoughts and stop them from launching boxes from your mouths. Thank you. That's me.
Thank you, Catherine. That is fair to say, with the claps and the hearts, and people have found the words that you spoke really they're very powerful, and you describe very well, not just one hat, but two hats or many hats. So thank you very much on behalf of everyone for sharing, because it's not always easy to share in a big forum. So we're going to break into group discussion, but if anyone has a burning question for Catherine, if you are okay taking questions, Catherine, maybe we can offer that to people. Would anyone like to ask Catherine anything before we break into groups? I don't think there are any questions. So, Alison, Duncan, can I bring you in?
I'd just like to say, Catherine, as someone with lived experience, that was absolutely brilliant, and it resonated with me on so many levels. And you keep on wearing your hats because you're absolutely rocking them. So just thank you for that contribution. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Alison. That's very kind and very well deserved as well, Catherine. So let's break now for some discussion. So can I have the next slide, please, so I can introduce. So for breakout discussion, we can have some guidance in terms of etiquette. You'll probably have heard this many times, but I thought of sharing the points that people with lived experience shared about what works in having conversations around mental health related topics, particularly in relation to stigma, discrimination, and experiences. So some pointers here. We all have the same aim: respect confidentiality. It's okay to discuss issues raised, but maybe be mindful not to use names or anything personal that could be identified back. Be supportive. All voices matter. Respect people's opinions. Challenge the issue, not the person, and don't dominate the conversation. So if it's possible, I think, could we have the next slide, please? Yeah, so for this initial discussion, we spoke about quite hard-hitting information, and it's good for us participants to take a step back and reflect. So if you could, we're going to split you into groups. So if you could give thought to these two questions, if you get through two, that's great. If not, just choose one, maybe start with the first one. What are your reflections from what you've heard so far? Has anything surprised you? And is there anything you can do to help address some of the stigma identified? So if you can, give this some thought and share your reflections with others, and I'll give us until like 10 minutes, and then we'll come back if that's okay. So could we get the breakout room set up, please?
We all have a diagnosis of BPD. We've all been through a form of therapy, whether it be DBT or STEPS or emotional coping skills group. We've all had different life experiences, come from different backgrounds, different experiences of diagnosis. Our BPD manifests in different ways, as it does. There's, BPD is not a one size fits all diagnosis. There's so many different permutations of it, which I don't think is something that is recognised enough. Given that there's the 9 criteria that exist, of which you have to fulfill, 5, at least 5. So you've got 256 different permutations. So it can vary so widely from person to person. But what is common to us all is a really, really strong desire to do something positive and active to help make things better for others living with BPD. And a lot of that is based on experiences that we've had which have been negative, and experiences of stigma that we've had. Chose the name BPD Dialogues because we wanted to open that conversation and get people talking about BPD, and really, and have our voices heard, and have this opportunity to make a difference and to challenge that stigma that we've had in the past, that we've encountered in the past. And we've done this in different ways. In 2021, we did a campaign for BPD Awareness Month. We had various Twitter posts, and we also had a couple of blogs that were published. And that was, written by us. It's our voice getting out there and challenging some of the stigma, trying to, address some of the misrepresentation that's out there about, being attention seeking, manipulative, all those words that come up. One of our main labour of love, if you like, has been producing a leaflet, which has not been rolled out yet, but it has been printed. It's been a long process because obviously COVID meant that it all had to be done over Zoom. But it's here. It's called Borderline and Beyond. And we wanted to produce this. It's aimed primarily at people who are just receiving a diagnosis of BPD and who are, feeling lost, and in recognition of the fact that people respond differently to the diagnosis. For me, it was a relief after many, many years of being told it was just depression and anxiety. For others, it can be a negative experience having this label attached. And we wanted to produce this resource so that there's something concrete there, so that people aren't going and looking and finding these, going to Dr. Google and finding those negative, misrepresentations. We wanted it to be accessible language, not formal and NHS-y looking. So we asked Medical Illustrations to brighten it up, which apparently they've never been asked to do before. It's written in our voice. It's us talking to those people who we were. We're talking from our perspective now. We're thinking, what would we have wanted back then? It includes quotes from us, and it also emphasises that BPD, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. You're not fundamentally flawed. And it also brings out that there's positives, that we can be some of the most empathetic people you can encounter. We're not monsters. And on top of that, we've also made training videos. 2 have been rolled out already to be used in staff training, such as the crisis team. 2 more are in the process of being made. And this is us speaking to staff when we're not in a place of crisis, when we're not hysterical on the phone. And so they can see us for us. They can see the individual. They can see our faces. They can hear our voices talking in a rational way and speaking about things that we find helpful and what is not helpful. The us behind the diagnosis, real people with voices worth hearing, because people on the front line, they need to hear what we have to say, because all of us in the group have experienced stigma and being treated as a diagnosis rather than an individual. What we're doing, it might just be a drop in the ocean, but a drop can create a ripple, and a ripple can create a wave, and waves can get bigger and bigger and bigger, and can travel further and further and further to get. So that's just some background to what we do. So I'm going to pass over to Fiona now to talk about some experiences that she's had about around stigma. Fiona, go for it.
I do that all the time, sorry. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is kind of been touched on slightly on the presentations, but I'm going to talk about it from someone with a lived experience point of view. The first thing I'm going to cover is self-stigmatisation. This was something that I actually done because I felt ashamed and embarrassed with what I was thinking and what I was feeling. I didn't want to tell anyone, including family, because I didn't want to be judged. And also being a mother, I felt that my kids would be took away. I was an unfit mother. I didn't want the public to stigmatise me, and through the media you hear like horror stories of unfit mothers, kids being took away due to mental health issues, and I didn't want to be labelled. But also my family stigmatised me a lot as well. They would say like, why are you depressed? You've got a good life, you've got kids, you've got a husband, you've got everything, so why are you feeling like this? But they said I was attention seeking, you're only depressed, stop this, like get yourself together. So kind of things like that did hurt me, and that's what caused me to not open up and ask for help like professionally. So it took for things to get really bad before I ended up getting input from mental health services. But when I was diagnosed with BPD, my family continued to say like, oh, who have we got today? What personality are you today? So that kind of led me to isolate myself away from them and hide away, and it kind of added on to the problems rather than them supporting me and kind of helping me through it. Also services, I've quite a lot of bad experiences but good experiences. at the same time, some services see you as your diagnosis and don't treat you like as an individual with like a person-centred approach. It's just like, oh, you've got BPD, we don't believe you that you're feeling suicidal, you're not going to do anything, it's normal for you to feel like that, which I think the training would help with them, because everybody's an individual and we all require different needs and support, and I think this is something that needs to be looked at, because it does stop you from then calling crisis, calling duty, because they look at your notes and go, oh, she's got PPT, like she's not going to do anything, so we'll just kind of leave her. It's normal to feel suicidal or feel like self-harming. So I do think like more training needs to be provided, and people with lived experience need to be involved in that training, which it is happening now, but I think it kind of needs to be done with it, to kind of let these people know how we exactly feel and what we think would help support us in the future. And about the hospital admissions, we touched on that a wee bit, and I was told that it was studies had shown that if you've got BPD and in a hospital environment, they kind of think you would deteriorate, but when you're not able to keep yourself safe, then that is the next step, is obviously being in hospital and being surrounded by staff that are trained on mental health. So that's one of the things that I found when I got told that I had BPD. It's a fight to get you into a ward to keep yourself safe. So I kind of find that bad. And also when you phone up crisis and they see that you've done DBT, the first thing they jump to is, have you used your skills? When they don't actually look at you and say, right, this is what's like going on. When you're above that window of tolerance, skills aren't going to bring you down. You need support to kind of bring you down to a level that then skills will kick in and you will start using them. And also wider services. I got onto the weight management service, and within like 10 weeks my mental health deteriorated, and they discharged me because I was unstable and said that I wouldn't be allowed back. Within 6 to 12 months I had to have a stable mental health within 6 to 12 months, but someone without mental health isn't even stable for 12 months. So that's impossible. So it's kind of indirect discrimination that I can't get back into that, because you don't have 12 months of stability with EUPD. Also, when I got the diagnosis, as Alison said, I did feel relieved with it, because then it made me understand why I felt the way I felt, and I felt as if I was failing in life before I got the diagnosis. And when I got it, I kind of felt, well, I'm not actually failing. It is a proper diagnosis and it wasn't my fault. But I did put a lot of pressure on myself before the diagnosis. And I think it was due to the media, the public and my family. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Alison. Bang on time. That's amazing. Amazing. Thank you for sharing, both of you. I think it's great to hear about a group of people with lived experience that really are reflecting on their own experiences and trying to share, you know, what they went through, and also take a constructive approach to ensuring that, you know, that there are changes embedded into services and staff training, such as more inclusive language and understanding a bit better the experiences of borderline personality disorder. So thank you both. We're going to break into groups again now. So I might have forgotten before to say that they are self-facilitated, because we have a lot of people here, so we wouldn't be able to have facilitators in all the rooms. So can I have the next the next slide, please. I think there were a couple of questions around when the resources that the BPD Dialogues group will be producing or have producing, but I think there has been information in the chat about where, who to contact to get that information. So hopefully that's all sorted. So moving on to group discussion then, you have here 3 prompts. Please don't feel you have to cover them all. So maybe it's helpful for you to read them and then to just start wherever you feel you want to. It's your most interested or more interesting point for discussion. Is what might be the barriers and enablers to adopting more inclusive language in services. How can we support staff in services to have the knowledge, capacity, ability, and confidence to offer person-centered, compassionate care to people living with mental illness, particularly personality disorder? And are you aware of any services or interventions that help reduce mental health stigma around the condition? So if you can break us into groups, I will give ourselves like about 12-15 minutes and we'll give you